She didn't warn us this time. She hunted. That's the only way I know how to describe what my daughter did on a Tuesday afternoon. In a hallway she had walked 1,000 times before, when she stopped mid-step, turned completely away from her toys, and walked. Walked, not crawled, not pointed, walked, straight toward a closet door none of my men had checked in over a week. Inside that closet was a man who had been hiding in my house for 4 days. My name is Deo Chukwu. 6 months ago, my daughter's warning saved my life in a parking garage. I thought I understood what she was capable of. I was wrong then. And I was wrong again the day she led 4 armed men to a target they didn't even know existed, using nothing but her own 2 feet and a certainty in her eyes that I still haven't found the words for. Let me take you back to where the last chapter of this ended, because you need to understand how much changed in 6 months and how much of it I never saw coming. For a moment, standing in that hallway watching a 1-year-old walk toward a locked door with more certainty than most grown men carry into a gunfight, I felt something I hadn't felt since the very first night I found her in the rain. Not fear exactly. Something closer to awe laced with dread, the specific kind of dread that comes from realizing you are raising something the world has no name for yet, and that every month that passes, the gap between what she is and what anyone can explain only grows wider. After the fire, after Sung-ho ran, after I buried 2 good men and let 2 other men, one who betrayed me, one who orphaned my daughter, walk away alive, I told myself the worst of it was over. I told myself we'd earned a season of peace. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. Standing in my rebuilt East Wing, watching Amara take her first real steps across a floor that used to be on fire. She's early for walking, Fola said, standing beside me that morning, arms crossed. The way she always stood when she was quietly cataloging something about my daughter that worried her more than she wanted to admit. She's early for everything, I said. You know that better than anyone. I keep waiting for her to slow down, Fola admitted. Every book I've found, every fragment of the old texts my sister used to reference, says the gift grows gradually. A child senses fear before danger for years before anything sharper develops. Amara skipped that timeline entirely. She went from warning to walking into locked closets in under 6 months. Is that dangerous? I don't know, Fola said, and I could hear how much it cost her to admit that. That's what frightens me most. Not what she is. That none of us, not me, not the texts, not 30 years of Sung-ho's research, actually know what she's becoming or how fast. Fola had stayed. I want you to understand what that meant 6 months in. She had a room in the West Wing now, a place at my table, a place in Amara's life that had stopped feeling like surveillance and started feeling like family, though neither of us had said that word out loud yet. She trained with my men in the mornings, quiet and disciplined in a way that earned their respect faster than I expected. In the evenings, she read old texts in a language I didn't recognize, texts she said belonged to her sister's side of the bloodline, searching for anything that might explain what Amara was becoming. I found something, she told me one night, sliding a worn, leather-bound book across the table between us, her fingers lingering on the cracked spine like it held something fragile. A reference to his second child. Same crossing, different family, born almost the same year as Amara. If it's real, if he survived, he'd be old enough now to already understand what he is. A boy, Fola confirmed. Raised, according to this, by the very people who orphaned Amara in the first place. I sat with that for a long moment, feeling the weight of it settle somewhere behind my ribs. You're telling me there's another child like her, raised by our enemies instead of by us? I'm telling you, Fola said, that if he exists, Sung-ho didn't just fail to erase this bloodline. He decided to weaponize the half of it he could still control. Why would he do that? He spent 30 years trying to erase all of it. Maybe, Fola said slowly, like the thought had only just crystallized for her. Because erasing all of it stopped being possible the moment you found Amara in that rain. Maybe controlling one half became the only option he had left. I didn't believe her, not fully, not until the day Amara walked into that closet. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, which I've learned by now means nothing in my life, because the ordinary days are always the ones that break wide open. Amara had been playing on the floor of the sitting room, stacking blocks with a concentration that always unsettled the guards more than it should have. And then, without warning, without her usual scream or her usual rigid stillness, she simply stood, turned, and walked. I followed her because I have learned, in the hardest way possible, never to do anything else. The house went quiet around us as she moved, the way it always does when the men on duty notice her doing something they don't have a name for. I felt my own pulse rising with every step she took, that same old cocktail of fear and awe I still hadn't found a way to separate from each other. She led me down the east hallway, past 3 doors she'd never shown interest in before, and I found myself cataloging each one as we passed. The study, the old sitting room, a storage closet we barely used, waiting for her to stop at any of them, and she didn't. She kept walking, small and certain, until she reached a linen closet that backed onto an old maintenance shaft, one of the same hidden corridors we'd used to escape the raid 6 months earlier. She stopped in front of it, pointed one small finger at the door, and said her first real word. Bad. I didn't wait for confirmation. I called my men, weapons drawn, and when we opened that closet, we found a man crouched in the dark, a tracking device in his pocket and a knife in his boot, for days' worth of stolen food wrappers around him like he'd been living inside my own walls for the better part of a week, without a single one of my people noticing. My hands were steady on my weapon. My mind was anything but. For days. He had been 4 feet from my daughter's nursery for 4 days, and none of the men I paid to protect this house had noticed, and it had taken a 1-year-old girl to find what an entire security detail had missed. How? I said, staring at him, staring at the space he'd carved out of my own house right under everyone's noses. Did you get in here? He didn't answer me. He looked past me instead, at Amara, standing small and calm in the hallway behind me, and something like fear crossed his face that had nothing to do with the gun in my hand. She's not supposed to be able to do that yet, he said quietly. She's not supposed to find us. Not for years. If you think Amara's ability just leveled up in a way nobody expected, comment, she hunted below. We got nothing else useful out of him that night beyond that single sentence, because he bit down on something in his back molar before my men could stop him, and it was over before I even understood what I was watching. I'd seen that kind of loyalty before, the kind bought with fear so deep it outlasts the fear of dying. I'd seen it in men who worked for Sung-ho. Fola confirmed it within the hour, going through what little the man had carried. A insignia, small, stitched into the collar of his jacket, one she recognized immediately. This is the same mark, she said, as the boy I told you about. Same house, same bloodline, same people. So they sent him to watch her, I said. Not to hurt her yet, to learn what she's becoming. Worse, Fola said. I think they sent him to test how close she is to finding him first. Roche's absence had left a hole in my organization I hadn't fully filled in 6 months, and it was in that gap that a new problem started to grow, quietly, the way problems always grow best, in the space where trust used to live. His name was Juno, a young lieutenant I'd promoted faster than I probably should have. Hungry in the way ambitious men always are, loyal in the way that only gets tested when it actually matters. I trusted him with more than I trusted most, mostly because Amara had never once reacted to him the way she'd reacted to Roche before his betrayal came to light. That should have told me something. It didn't, not until it was almost too late. You've been distracted, Juno said to me one evening, watching me review the same intelligence report for the 3rd time, trying to trace how deep the infiltration in my own house had actually gone. Since the closet. You don't trust anyone in this house anymore, do you? Should I? I asked. You should trust the people who've bled for you, he said, and there was something in his voice that night I couldn't quite place, something that felt, in hindsight, like a man rehearsing a line he'd need later. I didn't catch it then. I caught it 3 weeks later, and by then, the damage had already started. The damage came in the form of 2 of my oldest allies pulling their support within the same week, citing reasons that didn't add up, using language that felt coached rather than genuine. I've built alliances for 20 years. I know the difference between a man stepping back because he's afraid and a man stepping back because someone gave him a much better reason to. I went to see the first of them myself, a man named Beck who'd stood beside me through 3 separate territory wars, hoping I could talk sense back into an alliance I'd thought was solid enough to survive anything. It's not personal, Deo, Beck said, not quite meeting my eyes across his own desk, in his own office, in a building I had once helped him keep out of enemy hands. But my people have families. And the word going around is that you're not just protecting a gifted child anymore. You're protecting 2 of them now, and one was raised inside enemy territory. That's not a war I signed up to be adjacent to. You signed up to be adjacent to me, I said. Not to a set of terms that change every time someone whispers something new in your ear. Someone didn't whisper anything, Beck said, though the way his eyes flicked briefly toward the door told me otherwise. I read the reports. I heard about the man in your closet. I heard about your lieutenant switching sides. A house with that much instability isn't a house I want my name tied to, no offense meant. None taken, I said, though I felt every word of it as an offense regardless. Just know that when this is over, and it will be over, I'll remember exactly who stood with me and who didn't. I didn't get anything more useful out of him than that, and I left knowing that whatever thread was pulling my allies apart, it wasn't clumsy. It was patient, precise, working through fear rather than force, which meant it was working exactly the way Sung-ho had always worked. Someone's turning them, I told Fola, pacing my office at 2 in the morning, the way I used to pace it back when Amara was still small enough to fit in one arm. One at a time, quietly, the same way Sung-ho turned Rosha. Or the same way Rosha was never really working alone, Fola said. I stopped pacing. What are you saying? I'm saying, Fola said slowly, like she'd been holding this thought back for longer than she wanted to admit. That Sung-ho didn't disappear after that warehouse. He restructured. And I think whoever he's using inside your house now isn't hiding in your closets anymore. I think they're standing in your meetings. That's a short list of people, I said. It's a short list, Fola agreed. And I don't like how short it is, because it means whoever it is has been close enough to you to know exactly which allies would be easiest to frighten off first. I confronted Juno the way I'd confronted Rosha, in the same room, because some patterns in this life apparently repeat themselves whether I want them to or not. Tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing, I said. Juno didn't flinch the way Rosha had. That should have told me everything. I'm doing exactly what I think is right, he said. You've built this entire house around a child none of us fully understand, Deo. You've let a woman with no proven loyalty stand inside your walls because she shares blood with your daughter. You've turned this organization into something built entirely around protecting one little girl's secret, and some of us think that's a war none of us signed up to fight. Then you should have walked away, I said, instead of selling us out from the inside. I didn't sell you out, Juno said, and for the first time, something like real anger cracked through his composure. I've been talking to Sung-ho, yes, but not to hurt her, to understand what she is before it's too late to control it. He's not the monster your aunt-in-law paints him as, Deo. He's the only one who's been honest with you about what she's actually going to become. You've been talking to the man who orphaned her, I said, and I felt the same cold certainty settle over me that I'd felt in that first warehouse, 6 months ago, hearing his name for the first time. The man who left a newborn in the rain and called it strategy. He didn't want her to die, Juno said. He wanted her to disappear quietly, before the world ever noticed what she was. You're the one who made sure the world noticed. Every enemy you've made, every ally who's pulled away this month, every man who's died defending this house. That's the cost of you deciding she gets to exist loudly instead of safely. She's a child, I said, not a liability to be managed quietly. She's both, Juno said, quieter now, almost pleading. That's what none of you seem to understand. She can be your daughter and still be the single most dangerous variable in this entire city. I've watched you these past 6 months, Deo. You're not thinking like a strategist anymore. You're thinking like a father. And fathers get people killed. I stood there, stunned in a way I hadn't been since the night Fola first said Sung-ho's name to me. You've been talking to the man who orphaned her, and you're lecturing me about what love does to a man's judgment. I've been talking, Juno said, to the only person in this entire story who seems to understand that a child who can find hidden men through solid walls is not just a daughter to protect. She's a weapon nobody's prepared for, including you. If you didn't see Juno coming, tell me not again in the comments. I want to know if this betrayal hit harder than Rosha's. I threw him out that night, the same as I'd thrown out Rosha, and I told myself the same lie I'd told myself then, that removing the threat from my house meant removing the threat entirely. I have never been more wrong about anything in my life. Three nights later, Fola came to me with something I wasn't prepared for, something that would have broken whatever trust we'd built if I hadn't already learned, the hard way, to hear people out before I let my anger decide anything. I need to tell you something before someone else does, she said, and there was a fear in her voice I hadn't heard since the very first night I'd met her, zip-tied in that interrogation room. Sung-ho contacted me 2 weeks ago. Every muscle in my body went still. You've been talking to him too. Not the way you're imagining, she said quickly. He didn't ask me to betray you. He asked me to convince you to send her away. Somewhere he can't reach, somewhere none of this ever touches her again. He said if I got her out of this house, out of this war, he'd call off everyone looking for her. He said he was tired, Deo. Tired of 30 years of cleaning up a promise he never wanted to make in the first place. And you didn't tell me. I didn't tell you, Fola said, because I was trying to decide if he was telling the truth, and because some small, terrible part of me wondered if he was right. If she'd be safer far away from all of this, away from you, away from me, away from every single person who's ever put a target on her back just by loving her. I lost my sister to this bloodline, Deo. I have spent every day since then terrified of losing her daughter to it too. I felt something in my chest crack open in a way I wasn't prepared for. You considered taking her from me. I considered, Fola said, her voice breaking. Whether loving her the way I do meant I had to be willing to lose her, if it meant she got to live. I didn't decide anything, Deo. I came to you instead. That has to count for something. It counts, I finally said, after a long silence, feeling anger and understanding both fighting for the same space in my chest. But I need you to promise me something. If he ever contacts you again, I hear about it that same night. Not 2 weeks later. Not after you've spent that long wondering if he's right. I promise, Fola said quietly. I should have promised you that the first time. Juno didn't leave quietly. 2 nights after I threw him out, one of my safe houses on the north side of the city burned to the ground, and the message left behind, spray painted across the surviving wall, told me exactly who I was dealing with now. You should have listened. No one died in that fire, which I've come to understand wasn't mercy, it was precision. Juno knew that house held nothing but old records, nothing but paperwork I could afford to lose. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to prove he still could, whenever he wanted, and that every wall I thought protected me was thinner than I believed. He's not working with Sung-ho the way we assumed, Fola said, studying the wreckage the next morning, her arms crossed against the cold. Sung-ho wants this contained quietly. Juno wants you to feel exposed. Those aren't the same goal. Then what is his goal? I think, Fola said slowly, he genuinely believes what he told you. That Amara is a threat the world isn't ready for, and that you're too much of a father now to see it clearly. I think he's trying to force your hand, make you desperate enough to send her away yourself, the same way Sung-ho wanted me to convince you to do. 2 men, I said, both convinced the kindest thing I could do for my daughter is give her up. Both of them wrong. Both of them, Fola agreed, underestimating exactly how much you're capable of protecting once you've decided something is worth protecting at all. I doubled security around the house that week, moved Amara's nursery to the most defensible room in the East Wing, and started the search for Minjun in earnest, because if Juno was trying to force my hand, I intended to make my next move before he could force anything. It did count for something. It didn't fix the fact that I now had a second bloodline child raised by my enemies, a lieutenant who'd sold whatever loyalty he owed me for a conversation with a man he believed more than he believed me, and an aunt who'd spent 2 weeks weighing whether my daughter would be better off without either of us in her life. I found the boy before Sung-ho found a way to use him against us. His name, according to what little intelligence we gathered from the man in the closet before he ended himself, was Minjun, 10 years old, raised in isolation, trained the way you train a weapon rather than a child. Getting to him took 2 weeks of quiet work, bribed guards, forged transport manifests, favors called in from allies who hadn't yet abandoned me over the growing chaos around my house. Fola insisted on coming, and I didn't argue, not after everything she'd already confessed to me. I think some part of both of us understood that finding this boy was the only way either of us could prove, to ourselves as much as to each other, that we were capable of choosing the harder right thing over the easier wrong one. The compound sat 2 hours outside the city, disguised as a private boarding academy, the kind of place wealthy families send children they don't want to think about too carefully. From the outside, it looked almost peaceful. It was the inside that told the real story. There's no play yard, Fola said quietly, as we moved through the grounds under cover of night, my men clearing rooms ahead of us with a discipline I'd trained into them over years. No classroom windows facing outward. This isn't a school. It's a containment facility wearing a school's face. We hit resistance on the 2nd floor. 3 guards, armed, better trained than I expected for a facility disguised as something so quiet. The fight was fast and ugly, over in under a minute, but it was long enough for alarms somewhere deeper in the building to start sounding, long enough for me to understand we no longer had the luxury of moving carefully. We need to move faster, I told my men. Whatever's down there, they're not going to let us take it without a real fight now. We found him 3 floors down, in a room with no windows at all, sitting perfectly still on a cot, the way I imagine a child learns to sit when movement itself has been punished before. Alarms were still blaring somewhere above us, and yet he hadn't moved, hadn't flinched, hadn't even looked toward the door until I was standing directly in front of him. What we found broke something in me I didn't know was still capable of breaking. He wasn't guarded like a threat. He was guarded like a prisoner. They told me I'd hurt people if I ever left, he said, when I finally stood in front of him, small and pale and flinching from the sound of my own footsteps. They said the only reason I'm allowed to exist is because I'm useful to them. Do you believe that? I asked him. He looked at me for a long moment, calculating, the way a child shouldn't have to calculate anything. I don't know what I believe, he finally said. I've never been anywhere else to compare it to. I thought of Amara, safe in her nursery, safe because a man had chosen to stop and pick her up out of the rain instead of walking past her. I thought of everything this boy had never been given, simply because the people who found him first decided a weapon was more valuable than a child. You're not a weapon, I told him, crouching down so I wasn't looking down at him the way everyone in his life probably had. Whatever they told you, it was a lie designed to keep you controllable. You're a child, and children deserve better than what's been done to you. He looked at me like no one had ever said that to him before. I believe, now, that no one ever had. If I come with you, he asked, what happens to me? You get to be a kid, I said. For the first time in your life, probably. That's it. That's the whole plan. It wasn't a sophisticated answer. It was the only true one I had. Getting him out was harder than getting in. The alarms had brought more guards than I'd accounted for, and we fought our way back through 2 floors of resistance with Minjun pressed close against my side, flinching at every gunshot in a way that told me exactly how unfamiliar violence still was to a boy who'd been raised to become a weapon rather than to wield one. Fola cleared the final corridor herself, moving with a precision that reminded me, uncomfortably, of how little I still knew about everything she'd learned in the years before I met her. We made it to the vehicles with minutes to spare before reinforcements would have made extraction impossible. Minjun didn't speak the entire drive back to the city, just stared out the window like he was trying to memorize a world he'd never been allowed to see properly before. Sung-ho found us before we made it back to the city, which I understand now was inevitable, because a man who spent 30 years hunting one bloodline was never going to let the other half of it walk free without a fight. You took something that isn't yours, he said, standing in the road ahead of my convoy, alone, which told me either he was far more confident than he should have been, or far more desperate. I signaled my men to hold their positions, not yet, and stepped forward myself. You raised a child like a weapon, I said. I'm not giving him back to that. He was never meant to be raised any other way, Sung-ho said. That's the part you refuse to understand, Deo. Children like them, children like Amara, like Minjun, the world doesn't have room for them to simply exist as children.